West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Last year, Republicans in Arizona lined up behind a bill that would have punished teachers and opened them up to lawsuits. The idea was this: if a student was, for example, scared to tell his or her family that they were gay or transgender or thinking about those issues, and the student decided instead to talk with their teacher about it, well, this Arizona law would create an affirmative legal obligation for the teacher, forcing the teacher to call the student's parent and tell. And if the teacher didn't do it, Arizona Republicans said that teacher should lose his or her license, and it should be okay for the teacher to be sued as an individual. During that same session, Republicans also pushed legislation that would have banned books like Maya Angelou's book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, or George Orwell's 1984, or F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. They'd all be banned. Critics say that because of the way that bill was originally crafted, it would have also made it illegal to teach anything at all about homosexuality. You could not say that it exists. What those two bills had in common is that to create those bills, Republicans in Arizona consulted with the same far-right interest group, a group called Family Watch International. It's based in Arizona, but while that group is based in Arizona, they really only dabble in this stuff in the United States. Where they really do most of their work is overseas. This is a right-wing anti-gay group in America, in Arizona, that for years has backed anti-gay legislation in countries like Nigeria, where same-sex relationships are punishable by death, depending on what part of the country you're in. Along the way, this Arizona group has also forged close ties with the virulently anti-gay activists who were enthusiastic supporters in Parliament of Uganda's previous Kill the Gays bill. In March of this year, just weeks ago, this Arizona group was one of the key organizers of a conference in Uganda that hosted lawmakers, hosted elected officials from more than a dozen countries in Africa. At this conference, again, organized by an Arizona conservative group, lawmakers from more than a dozen countries gathered in Uganda and promised that in their home countries, they would push legislation against the sin of homosexuality. Here's the head of Family Watch International meeting with her longtime friend, the First Lady of Uganda, at that conference. The First Lady said that during that most recent meeting, they discussed, in her words, concern about the imposition of harmful practices like homosexuality. American activists taking that message abroad. Well, now Family Watch International's efforts appear to be paying off. Just a few weeks ago, the parliament in Uganda passed what amounts to a new Kill the Gays bill that would impose the death penalty for certain offenses. It calls for life in prison for anybody who has gay sex. It makes it illegal to advocate for the rights of LGBTQ people. Advocacy would carry up to 20 years in prison as its penalty. The White House has already come out hard against this legislation.
Before I turn it over to my NSC colleague here, I want to say one thing at the top. We have grave concerns with the passage of the Anti-Homosexuality Act, AHA, by the Parliament of Uganda yesterday, and increasing violence targeting LGBTQI+ persons. The bill is one of the most extreme anti-LGBTQI+ laws in the world. Human rights are universal. No one should be attacked, imprisoned, or killed simply because of who they are or whom they love.
Strong criticism from the White House by the Biden administration for this proposed new Kill the Gays law in Uganda. The status of it right now is that it's been sent back to the parliament in Uganda for, quote, strengthening. Apparently, the president of Uganda wanted a provision added regarding so-called conversion therapy to cure people of being gay. But as far as we know, this thing could be reintroduced as soon as tomorrow. Our next guest, who's joining us live from Uganda, is one of the most accomplished, most respected LGBTQ rights activists in that whole part of the world. He told us today that the parliament in his country has issued notice that it's going to reconsider this bill during tomorrow's session. He says members of parliament have confirmed that tomorrow may in fact be the day. What that means for us here in this country is that, yes, the Biden administration has already spoken out about this bill, but if they are going to turn up the heat on this, if they are really going to try to use their influence to stop this, the time is now. The time is right now, as in tonight. Joining us now from Uganda's capital city of Kampala is Frank Mugisha. He's the executive director of Sexual Minorities Uganda. Mr. Mugisha, I really appreciate you being here. I know it's a dangerous time for you to be speaking out, and I also know that it's the middle of the night where you are. I really appreciate you being here, sir.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for amplifying our voice now and back then when the Kill the Gays bill was just introduced. We appreciate that, and we need that for our voices to be amplified, not only here in Uganda, but also in other parts of Africa where this kind of legislation is being introduced. Thank you for having me.
Of course. We, as you mentioned, we covered the initial iteration of this bill in 2009 when it went through a long process when it was eventually shelved. Can you tell us about the difference? Is this essentially a continuation of that same idea? Is this worse in some ways? Is it similar legislation?
This legislation is very, very draconian and extreme. This legislation, in my words, and I've said it many times, it is here to erase the entire existence of an LGBTQ person in Uganda, but also it radicalizes Ugandans into hatred of the LGBTQ community, and we're already seeing that happening. This could lead to mob justice. This could lead to people getting disowned by their own families because it compels every person to report any person who is known as an LGBTQ person to the authorities. So this bill is more extreme than the one that was introduced in 2009.
Compelling other citizens to report fellow citizens, fellow Ugandans who they believe to be gay. Tell me, we have seen some coverage in the United States, including, I think, some important reporting in the New York Times about LGBTQ Ugandans fleeing the country, going to Kenya and going to other places, basically trying to avoid the kind of mob justice, the kind of vigilante violence that you're describing. What do you think, if this passes, what do you think this law would mean for people who are out, for people who are activists like yourself?
If this law is passed, we will definitely see many people get arrested. We will see many LGBTQ persons leave the country. So many of the LGBT community members are already fleeing the country. They're trying to go to neighboring Kenya, which is not safe as well. But they feel they would be safer in Kenya than be in prison in Uganda. And we're already seeing Ugandans, like I said, radicalized, hating on LGBTQ persons. We're seeing violence. We're seeing many cases of violence, social exclusion, people getting beaten. So we're seeing that increase. If this bill is passed or signed by the president, we'll definitely see many of the LGBT community members leave the country. We'll see many people get arrested. People like myself who are outspoken, I could end up getting arrested. And many of my colleagues who are outspoken as well could end up being in prison.
Mr. Mugisha, I just have to ask you, if it made a difference for the Obama administration, for the U.S. government to speak out against this proposed legislation when we saw an earlier iteration of this years ago, and in your opinion, would it make a major difference if the Biden administration, if American politicians of all stripes took a firmer stand on this, took a louder stand on this, and put pressure on your country's government to not do it? Would it make a difference if America stood up?
It would make a very big difference if Americans spoke directly to our Ugandan authorities and told them how dangerous this legislation is for the LGBT community here, and how this legislation is going to make the LGBT community unsafe living here in Uganda, and how this legislation is a gross violation of human rights of LGBTQ persons. Yes, it would make a very big difference.
It is Tuesday, the 2nd of May of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. Okay, well, how are you doing on this fine Tuesday? We are moving along, aren't we? Yes, we are. Got a busy day ahead of us in real life, and been quite busy this morning as well. And got a little behind in prep for the show, so we'll see how that goes. But anyway, plenty of news out there in the world to choose from, so we chose some, didn't we? Yes, we did. Okay, well, what's happening on the home front? Well, we got medical appointments and all sorts of things to do today, and pretty much as soon as we wrap up shop here, we're heading out the door. So there's that. Okay. Well, I did get a hold of the vet yesterday and let them know that Ginger had passed, and they were quite sad about that, but they were there to, I guess, let me know, and they did, and I just thought that well, she had more time, and she didn't. Fortunately, she did go pretty quick, as I mentioned, so at least there was no lingering suffering, though she did have the congestive heart issue for a few years, actually, now that I started looking at all the bills. But she was a good little dog, and we miss her still. Gunner, the English Bulldog, our snoozing sous chef, goes around and, sniffs at like her little bed and where she would eat, and different parts of the yard where she liked to hang out. So I like to think that he knows. I'm sure that he does, but since we can't actually speak with our animals, it's hard to tell. And we also have a tendency to put human traits to animal behavior, and that may not necessarily be true. They may not have those traits that we've ascribed to them because, well, we are species specific, aren't we? Yes, we are. One of the things that Ginger would do, and especially when her hearing started getting really bad, is that she would mouth. We would talk to her, and then she would move her mouth like she was forming words. And I like to think that she was trying to talk to us. And she did it quite a bit with me towards the end. I'd speak with her and give her little kisses, and she'd lick my hand and lick my cheek, and look like she was mouthing little words like, "I love you too." Wouldn't that be nice? So, as I said, we humans always want to ascribe human behaviors to the behaviors of animals. And as if that's supposed to be better. Our behaviors are better, so they must. Well, might not be the case, but nonetheless, life is precious, isn't it? It is indeed. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and let you know what we have in store for you today and get right into it. So at the top there, U.S. religious extremists are pushing radical anti-gay laws in Africa because I guess they really want to do it here, but it's harder. They will continue to try, though, as they are. On the rest of the menu, a Minnesota man set fire to 2 mosques, vandalized Ilhan Omar's office, and then targeted a Somali mall. Just don't call it racism. A California mom influencer who claimed that a Latino couple tried to kidnap her 2 children has been convicted of 1 count of making a false police report. Another Karen. And a lawsuit in Texas alleges SpaceX used a state wildlife preserve as a dumping ground for space waste. After the break, we move to the chef's table where millions have already snapped up the new Germany-wide public transit ticket. And Britain's finance ministry said the country's banking system remained safe, sound, and well capitalized after the First Republic Bank collapse. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page from that chat room link to the left and down just a skosh at our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio and possibly send us what you might spend on an espresso type coffee drink once a month, that really helps us pay our bills and all the other costs that are incurred in running this powerhouse of resistance. And boy, do we need it now. Yes, we do. Funds and resistance against the dark forces arrayed against representative democracy, not only here in the United States, but around the world. We must stop them in their tracks. And stopping them in their tracks doesn't mean they're stopped. And thank you to those of you who may consider being generous in the future, because boy, will we need it. We're not going anywhere. Resistance never sleeps. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Also on Mastodon and Spoutable. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime. But you can always access the show notes and links diaries by going to the links provided on those social media feeds, and so I would suggest you do so. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. They're everywhere. Everywhere. All right. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Sarah K. Burris out of Raw Story. An individual is suspected of setting fire to 2 Minneapolis mosques last week and then going on to vandalize Ilhan Omar's office before moving on to a shopping center known as the Somali Mall, federal authorities reported. Jackie Ram Little, age 36, was charged via warrant at the end of last week in connection with all 3 attacks that are being treated by the federal authorities as hate crimes. The motive has not been revealed, But FBI Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara confidently believe it was hate-related, as they were all designed to inflict terror onto the Muslim community. One fire was at the Masjid al-Rahma Islamic Center on April 23rd, and Masjid al-Rahma the following day. According to a representative of the latter, cited tens of thousands of dollars in damages, the complaint says. A local Minnesota site, Bring Me the News, noted that the federal criminal complaint was filed on Sunday and said that he spray-painted 500 on the door of the federal office of Representative Omar on January of 2023. The same number was spray-painted on the side of a patrol car assigned to a Somali officer with the Minneapolis PD and in the entry of the Somali Mall Marketplace entry. To some Christians, the number 500 means blessings from a divine realm or a guardian angel. And that's the Ministry of Numerology claims that. Little was ultimately arrested in Mankato over the weekend. The complaint cited Little's mother, who revealed to investigators that he extensively harassed a Muslim female in the past and has had a fascination with fire from a young age. She confessed that she suspected he was responsible for several unreported arson events. His mother was also the one who identified her son through surveillance footage. The Plymouth police also recognized him from another arson incident. As far as I'm concerned, we're going to assume that this was motivated by hate. This was motivated by bias, O'Hara said. When he was arrested, Little was going to a mental health facility. The transportation to the facility was overseen by the county sheriff's office, who connected the dots. The attentiveness of a dispatcher realized that this was the person that we were interested in making an arrest, O'Hara said. Salvador Hernandez of the Los Angeles Times brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A California mom influencer who claimed on Instagram in 2020 that a Latino couple tried to kidnap her 2 children has been convicted of one count of making a false police report, according to the Sonoma County District Attorney's Office. Katie Sorensen, age 31, was convicted, and she could face a sentence of up to 6 months in jail, the DA's office said. This verdict will enable us to hold Ms. Sorensen accountable for her crime, while at the same time helping to exonerate the couple that was falsely accused of having attempted to kidnap 2 young children, District Attorney Carla Rodriguez said in a statement. This case is also important in that it illustrates the importance of using social media responsibly. Sorensen was acquitted of 2 other counts of making a false report of a crime. In an emailed statement, Sorensen's attorney, Charles Dresso, said Sorensen was glad to be acquitted of the 2 other charges. The evidence introduced at trial was very different than how the case has been portrayed outside the courtroom, Dresso said. Sorensen called the Petaluma Police Department on December 7th of 2020 and claimed that a couple tried to kidnap her children in the parking lot at a Michael's Crafts store in Petaluma, California, prosecutors said. About a week later, Sorensen posted a video on Instagram adding significant details about the alleged near abduction that had not been disclosed to police, according to prosecutors. Sorensen's social media post about the alleged encounter went viral, with people across the country airing support for the then Sonoma mother, who said she posted the video to raise awareness. "My children were the targets of attempted kidnap," Sorensen said in her original video, which has since been deleted. "It happened," she said. She accused the couple of lingering by her car near the children's double stroller and that she had been paralyzed by fear during the incident. In interviews with news stations and other outlets, Sorensen would double down, claiming she had been followed by a Latino couple into the store who allegedly made comments about her children. Police would go on to follow up with Sorensen, who in subsequent interviews identified the alleged couple. Police released images of the couple from surveillance video, but the couple, recognizing themselves in news accounts, came forward and denied the allegations. The couple, Sadie and Eddie Martinez, said they were shopping for Christmas decorations and accused Sorensen of racially profiling them. "I couldn't believe it," Sadie said during a press conference at the time, according to the Press Democrat. "It's like we were literally guilty of being brown while shopping." When testifying during the trial, Sorensen said she had misinterpreted the events from December 7th. Sorensen's report was determined to be false, prosecutors said, and resoundingly contradicted by the couple and surveillance video from the store. She has since deleted all content from her Instagram account. Samantha Masunaga of the Los Angeles Times brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. In the latest fallout from SpaceX's Starship launch, South Texas environmental groups and a nonprofit representing Native Americans are suing the Federal Aviation Administration, alleging that the agency is not adequately protecting the surrounding natural habitat. The lawsuit, filed yesterday, Monday, alleges that the FAA did not properly assess the environmental and community impacts of SpaceX's launch site near Boca Chica, Texas, and that the mitigation measures it has prescribed are not enough to protect nearby wildlife. The launch site is near the Lower Rio Grande Valley National Wildlife Refuge and Boca Chica State Park. The location is a prime habitat for wintering shorebirds and other wildlife, including ocelots and sea turtles. After the Starship's rocket's explosive test flight on April 20th, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service determined that the launch hurled concrete particles up to 6.5 miles northwest of the launch pad and created about 385 acres of debris on SpaceX's site, as well as Boca Chica State Park. A 3.5-acre fire also started in the park, the agency said. It is vital that we protect life on Earth even as we look to the stars in this modern era of spaceflight. Jared Margolis, a senior attorney at the Nonprofit Center for Biological Diversity, said in a statement, federal officials should defend vulnerable wildlife and frontline communities, not give a pass to corporate interests that want to use treasured coastal landscapes as a dumping ground for space waste. Plaintiffs in the case include the Center for Biological Diversity, the American Bird Conservancy, the Surfrider Foundation, which advocates for protection of the ocean, Save RGV, a local environmental advocacy group, and the Carrizo Comecrudo Nation of Texas, a nonprofit cultural institution focusing on descendants of the Carrizo Comecrudo people and other indigenous groups. The Carrizo Comecrudo Nation of Texas joined the lawsuit because frequent road closures in the area due to rocket testing have impeded its ability to perform traditional rituals and customs at Boca Chica Beach, according to the lawsuit. The FAA said in an email it does not comment on ongoing litigation matters because who does? The agency had determined in an environmental assessment that SpaceX's launches would not have a significant impact on the surrounding area and issued the Hawthorne Company a launch license for operations there. After discovery of the debris spread, the FAA said SpaceX would be required to have ongoing monitoring of vegetation and wildlife by a qualified biologist, including a pre- and post-launch survey, and sending a report to the FAA and other state and federal agencies. The Elon Musk-led company would also be required to work with local and federal authorities to remove launch debris from sensitive habitats. The FAA is also conducting a mishap investigation of the test flight and will not allow the Starship rocket to launch again until it verifies that processes and procedures related to the mishap are not a danger to public safety. The plaintiffs in the environmental group lawsuit are seeking that the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia overturn the FAA's decision to grant SpaceX a vehicle operator license and force the agency to reanalyze the launch site's environmental impact. Well, let us now go to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Earlier this year, I kept hearing that one of California's most unusual natural wonders was sitting right outside San Diego. But when I pulled my car off the road next to a metal fence behind a landfill and a recycling center, I started to have some doubts. Hey, Chuck.
Yes.
How's it going?
Good, Chris. The entrance to the landfill is not the most impressive entrance to a national natural monument, but it protects it a little bit.
This is Scientific American's Science Quickly. I'm Christopher Intagliata. I've always been obsessed with visiting the more extreme corners of my home state, California. And back before Google Maps and Instagram made it so easy to see what stuff looked like before you get there, I'd just stare at this big paper AAA map of the state, find some place that looked interesting, and drive there in my old Honda Accord. Those trips took me to places like the floor of a pitch-black lava tube near the Oregon border, so dark inside I couldn't see 2 inches in front of my face, and all the way up to the crest of the White Mountains, wandering the bristlecone pines. But here was a place just a little over an hour from where I grew up that I'd never even heard of, the Miramar Mounds National Natural Landmark. And in a state full of superlatives, the lowest basin and the highest peak in the lower 48, the tallest waterfall in North America, the largest trees in the world, this place protects one of the tiniest wonders. It's way less iconic, for sure, but it's much more special to see, and it's almost on the verge of disappearing. A wildlife biologist named Chuck Black had offered to show me around. He's a caretaker of sorts here, so I hop into his truck, we drive down a muddy road. It's pretty flooded in places, too.
Oh, wow, we're driving through water.
Yeah. It's fairly deep, but it's as long as you stay on the gravel part, you're okay.
It rained a lot here in California this winter. It's the wettest winter I can remember in a long time. And all that rain's been a really good thing for what I came to see, vernal pools. Vernal pools are a type of seasonal wetland. They're these dried up muddy spots that when the water hits them, they just transform into shallow little ponds exploding with life. Chuck hops out of the truck and leads me to an overlook for a better view. It's a rolling, marshy landscape dotted with scrubby bushes and shrubs.
Vernal pools occur on these mesa tops, which were once at the bottom of an ocean. And when this was a level ocean floor, the shells of clams and crustaceans and things settled down over the millennia and formed a cemented layer, which is called a hard pan layer.
It's kind of like the bottom of a swimming pool.
And so if you dig down a couple of feet, you'd swear it was cement that somebody had put out at some time. And that's why the vernal pools exist.
Right now you can see these pools everywhere. And at first glance, they're not all that much to look at. But if you zoom in a little closer, you'll see an abundance of life. Dozens of little invertebrates and plants, and they've all adapted to take advantage of the opportunity these pools provide. Chuck stoops down next to one, our boots sinking into the mud, and he drags a little green aquarium net through the water. On the first pass, he pulls up one of the most iconic residents of these pools, the fairy shrimp.
So there we go. You see the fairy shrimp. There's a really nice large ones.
Oh, yeah. And they have two tiny little beady eyes, is it?
Yes, two little beady eyes.
If you remember raising sea monkeys as a kid, these fairy shrimp are related. They're tiny, delicate little crustaceans. And if vernal pools had a mascot, it would probably be these fairy shrimp. In fact, since this natural landmark is on land owned by the Marines, officially it is Marine Corps Air Station Miramar, the fairy shrimp actually have become somewhat of a mascot here. They actually make these little patches with them on it.
We have a fighting fairy shrimp medallion that people really laugh at. It's a fairy shrimp holding a machine gun. And every year, soon after the fairy shrimp show up, I take an aquarium full of shrimp into the commanding officer's headquarters.
I'll add that because Chuck is the resident wildlife biologist on this base, probably fits within his job description to drop an aquarium full of fairy shrimp at the commanding officer's desk.
It's always fun to get that reaction when you take a aquarium full of shrimp in and people see them for the first time.
I mean, they're quite delightful to watch swim.
Yeah.
He takes me farther down the muddy trail to look at a smaller pool.
See, here are some deer tracks. Deer came along and got stuck in the mud.
Crouches down, grabs a little sprig of something.
So this is San Diego mesa mint. If you pinch that and smell it,
oh, wow.
It smells just like a mint.
Yeah.
So that's San Diego mesa mint, and this one is San Diego button celery. That's Orangium ristulatum.
Both of those plants are endangered species, and several of the fairy shrimp species that live here are endangered too. They're endangered because a lot of their habitat has been paved over or turned into supermarkets and farmland. Statewide, it's estimated 90% of the pools that once existed have been destroyed. And maybe that's why I'd never even heard of this place or heard of vernal pools at all. Most of them are gone. but the ones that are left harbor a disproportionate number of California's native species compared to the surrounding areas.
So there's brachiopods, ostracods, copepods, cladocerans, and besides the crustaceans, there's a lot more.
Truly, a lot more.
There's worms, lots of kinds of insects. If you want to get small, there's rotifers and other kinds of, and protozoans. There's bacteria, there's algae, vascular plants. It's minestrone.
In the next episode, we'll talk with biologist Marie Simovich and other scientists about the suite of different plants and animals beyond fairy shrimp that call these pools home, and the one thing that unites a lot of them, a gift for living on the edge. Science Quickly is produced by Jeff Delvicio, Tulika Bose, and Kelso Harper. Music by Dominic Smith. Don't forget to subscribe to Science Quickly wherever you get your podcasts. Head over to scientificamerican.com for in-depth science news. For Science Quickly, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Nemhauser, filling in for your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. As the U.S. population ages, more people are at risk for injuries. The largest percentage of injury-related deaths among this group are caused by falls. Elizabeth Burns is with CDC's National Center for Injury Prevention and Control. She's joining us today to discuss ways to prevent injuries and deaths from falls among senior adults. Welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me.
Elizabeth, what are some of the more common consequences when a senior adult falls?
Well, first, it's important to note that falls are incredibly common. More than 1 in 4 older adults will fall in a given year. Common consequences include loss of independence and an increased fear of falling, as older adults are afraid to do the same kinds of activities they were doing before. And this can actually lead to more falls, as older adults have less strength in their lower body. Common consequences include hip fracture and traumatic brain injury. And ultimately, in 2016, almost 30,000 older adults died because of a fall.
So are falls more common in men or in women?
Falls are more common in women, and more women go to the emergency department because of a fall, and more women die because of a fall. However, the rate of fall deaths are more common in men than women. What this means is that out of 100,000 men, more will die from a fall than out of 100,000 women.
What are common causes of falls among older people?
Getting on and off the toilet and getting in and out of bed are common causes of falls. Walking around the hallways at night when the lights are off is a common way people fall. There's also an increased amount of medications used in seniors, which have side effects like making them lightheaded, and that increases the risk of falls and is a common cause.
With all of those factors, what are some ways our listeners can decrease their chances of falling?
Older adults should talk to their healthcare provider or doctor about how they can decrease their chances of falling. This can be done during the annual wellness visit or during annual physicals. The doctor will recommend an exercise program that should increase strength and balance, or maybe refer you to a physical therapist. Additionally, they can look through your medications and perhaps reduce your doses or suggest medications that decrease your chances of falls.
Are there things we can do to modify our homes to prevent falling?
Oh, absolutely. Installing grab bars on the side of the toilet, making sure that rugs are taped down or removed, making sure that there's lighting in the hallways are all really simple ways that an older adult can modify their home to prevent falls.
Where can listeners go to get more information about preventing falls?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov/study, and that's spelled STEADI.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I've been talking today with Elizabeth Burns about ways to prevent fall-related injuries and deaths among senior adults. Improving strength and agility through regular exercise and removing potential obstacles in the home can help decrease the risk for falls. If you or a loved one is older and struggle with mobility, talk with a healthcare provider about ways to decrease the risks for fall-related injuries and death. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Jeffrey Nemhauser for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
We're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
While the powers that be constantly warn us about foreign threats to our democracy from Russian trolls, TikTok, etc., there is scant coverage of an actual assault on our people's democratic liberties by forces on our own soil. It's coming from extremist right-wing Republican lawmakers who have autocratic control over more than a score of America's state governments. Their obscure anti-democracy weapon is called preemption, the dangerous power of state officials to nullify laws passed by local people. It's supposed to be used rarely, carefully, and only in emergency situations, but today's radical big government Republicans have weaponized it, routinely overturning local actions that the GOP's corporate funders don't like. Local decisions to protect worker safety, outlaw loan sharking, shut down puppy mills, prevent workplace discrimination, stop pollution, control political corruption, and so many more popular Democratic reforms are being abolished by Republican autocrats in service to plutocrats. Some 500 more of these usurpations are moving through state legislatures across the country now, with practically no public notice. Embarrassingly, GOP leaders in my state of Texas have been leading this charge against the people's democratic will, and they're now enacting a nuclearized escalation of their attack. Their new weapon has been dubbed Death Star, a state law that will preemptively ban cities and counties from passing corporate regulations stronger than state regulation, which is infamously feeble. The ban, gleefully pushed by a horde of lobbyists for brand-name corporate elites, includes letting corporations overturn existing local protections. This is Jim Hightower saying, "This is a wholesale usurpation of your and my liberty to govern ourselves. In exchange for political funding, GOP officials are literally outsourcing the people's democratic authority." Learn more at supportdemocracy.org. Howdy-ho, folks, and thanks for tuning in to my Hightower radio commentaries. And guess what? There's even more Hightower waiting for you online. Subscribers to my Substack newsletter, Jim Hightower's Lowdown, get commentaries, articles, interviews with progressive sparklies, live events, historical nuggets, and more. Go to jimhightower.substack.com to sign up, and you'll get more. That's jimhightower.substack.com.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1830. That was the birthday of Richard Trevillak, one of the early leaders of the U.S. labor movement and the fight for the 8-hour workday. Of English descent, Richard was the son of a Cornish farmer. As a young man, Trevillak took up the trade of a ship carpenter. Soon after, he traveled to Australia to seek his fortune and to prospect for gold. The horrible working conditions caused him to speak out for workers in Australia and New Zealand before arriving in the United States. First, he came to New Orleans, where he became involved in the trade union movement. When the Civil War broke out, he traveled north. In 1862, he settled in Detroit, working in the Detroit dry docks. Soon after, Richard became president of the Ship Carpenters and Caulkers International Union. He was well known as an eloquent speaker for the cause of labor. He founded the Detroit Trades Assembly. A short-lived organization, the assembly attempted to bring together skilled tradesmen to organize for improved working conditions and hours. His skills as an orator often put Trevelek in high demand in the nearby city of Chicago. On the 4th of July celebration held by the Chicago Trades Assembly in 1965, Trevelek called for the 8-hour workday. In his speeches, Trevelek advocated that workers should not see a reduction of pay for working 8 hours. Instead, he argued that increased productivity of workers should allow their wages to stay steady. He was also a proponent of worker education. He argued that a well-read workforce could better articulate its demands. In 1869, he was elected president of the National Labor Union, an early attempt to join workers across the country under the banner of one organization. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 50 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting to be a bit warmer than yesterday, should be in the mid to upper 60s. Cloudy and rainy throughout the day and afternoon, and should get a little bit of sun in the afternoon. And we will have winds light and variable, with rain coming in at about 1/4 of an inch. Then partly cloudy overnight with lows in the low 50s, winds light and variable, and then considerable cloudiness tomorrow with a stray shower or thunderstorm possible. Highs in the low 70s, winds will be out of the west at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Grass pollen is rated moderate here in Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 16 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is high at level 6. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.74 inches. Visibility is at 8 miles, and relative humidity is at 84%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 58 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 64 and partly cloudy. Rome is 63 and mostly cloudy, with an advisory for thunderstorms that may impact critical electrical infrastructure. Kyiv is 68 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 76 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 58 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 58 and clear. San Francisco, California is 50 degrees and mostly cloudy. And New York is 48 degrees Fahrenheit with light rain. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. The Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Public transit companies in Germany say more than 3 million people have already snapped up a new ticket being launched yesterday, Monday, that allows them to use all local and regional trains, buses, and metros across the country for about $53.90 a month U.S. That would be 49 euros. The new Germany ticket is intended to encourage people to ditch their cars in favor of far more environmentally friendly forms of transportation. It follows on from an experimental €9 all-you-can-ride ticket that proved to be a success last year, but which officials said was not financially viable. The new ticket is considered a revolution in Germany's fractured public transit system, where dozens of regional companies offered myriad different fare options that baffled many travelers. The Germany ticket will be valid for almost all forms of public transport, apart from long-distance intercity trains. Cross-country travel will still be possible using regional trains, significantly reducing costs for some people who used to pay hundreds of euros a month for their regular commutes. Chancellor Olaf Scholz hailed the new ticket as an easy and cheap offer that will make public transit more attractive and help us achieve our climate goals. Anti-poverty campaigners have called for the tickets, which are already subsidized, to be made even cheaper, at least for families, young people, and those on low incomes for whom it still remains an expensive option.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Mujiba M. at Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Britain's finance ministry said yesterday, Monday, that the country's banking system remained safe, sound, and well capitalized after First Republic Bank became the third major U.S. bank to fail in 2 months. As the Independent Bank of England has confirmed, the UK banking system remains safe, sound, and well capitalized, a spokesperson for the Treasury said. The spokesperson also said First Republic was a matter for U.S. authorities. Indeed. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. That's right. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.